we get into it, I'd like to chat about today's sponsor, VitaDrop. I've been using the VitaDrop sleep product for about a year now, and it absolutely blew me away the first time I used it. I looked at my sleep tracker and it had a 30% increase in my REM sleep. I'm somebody who spends a lot of time trying to optimize my sleep, and I'd never seen anything like that have a significant impact as it did. I remember messaging the co-founder, podcast guest, as well as a good friend of mine, Charlie, about it the next day, completely blown away. And then I've also shared this information with a number of people who have come back extremely surprised and very impressed with how much better they've slept once they've taken that sleep product. So they have 4 different products for 4 different day-to-day experiences, one of them being sleep, the next one being hydration, the third one being focus, and the fourth one being a collagen supplement. You can grab them both in ready to drink and in sachets that you mix with water. So if you're interested, use the code TOT in the description below to get 25% off your next order. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, lovely to meet you.
You too. Yeah, I was looking at a beautiful backdrop of the LA skyline and everything. It feels like one of those Zoom backdrops, but it's an actual backdrop. So you've done a really good job. Yeah, you've done a really good job there. So well done.
Thank you.
I've been following your work for a while. I came across your content with through Bryan Johnson's stuff that you work with him closely on. And I just want to say I really love the approach that you guys have taken. I feel like I've watched this journey for a very long time. I was saying off air since probably 2019, 2020, when it was just at its infancy. And it's been really, really great to see the progression and see the way the content's developed and see the way the story and the narrative have developed. And now it's turned into something wild. Like this is the blueprint drink thing. What is it?
Wow. Longevity mix.
Yeah, that's a longevity mix. I'm month 2 of 3 in the BP 5000. Wow. So I'm all in with you guys. Like you guys are crushing this, and I'm really curious as to where this goes. So, good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. So for people watching at home that don't know, Blueprint 5000 is this cohort of 5,000 people that we offered our products to first as beta testers to see what happens. We really didn't know, it's 74 interventions. It could go horribly wrong. Luckily, it hasn't yet.
It hasn't yet.
But yeah, what's your experience doing the stack?
It's so for context, it's for anyone that doesn't really know what's going on. And most people actually don't. Most people I speak to don't really know what is happening here. The only thing that they seem to know, which is something we can touch on in some more detail down the line, is I'll be like, hey, do you know this guy called Bryan Johnson? And they go, no. And I'll be like, oh, hold on. Do you know the guy who spends a couple of $1 million a year trying to reverse aging? Oh, yeah, I've heard about that guy. So it's funny how people don't remember names necessarily, but they remember the story narrative. They remember the tagline of this little thing that they've come across that sticks into their brain. So, I think that was done on purpose, correct?
Storytelling is the only thing that matters. That's definitely what I've learned over the years of working on viral marketing is you just got to have a good story, and that's what's going to be sticky in people's minds.
100%. So, my experience so far with this is there's a pudding that you can have, which is great, super easy. So that's my breakfast. And then I have this drink and a bunch of pills, and I did my blood test beforehand, and I haven't done my blood test on the tail end, but I'm very curious to see where it goes. So I'll check back with you in a month, and I'll send you a message and let you know what actually happened. But I've noticed that I am sleeping better. I'm not doing as many workouts as I probably could be for the whole Blueprint stack, especially given that I've been moving across the country and road tripping in a van, and it's been a whole thing. But and
DJing.
And and DJing and running events, and just it's been wild. But the what I've noticed is on an energy level, I sleep better. Generally, and on an energy level, I have so much energy. It's like an anxious level at an anxiety level. So if I have a coffee now, it tips me over to the point where I'm like, this is too much. I need to chill, which is a new feeling that I've not had in the past. And also I'm noticing I'm sharper. I'm feeling sharper than I have ever felt. So I think it's a combination of a few things just starting to take hold together. You know, it takes a few months, you know, potentially 6 months plus for things to really start to kick into gear. But it's been interesting. I'm in. And the thing I loved about it was when I did my 14-day trip from LA to New York, the one thing I really hate about the US is how bad the food is. And the more like highway you get, it's just fast food, fast food, fast food. And the only thing I've been eating is the nutty pudding, the longevity mix, and like beef jerky. And like, that was pretty much it.
What a combo.
Crazy combo. It's been so funny. I did a 14-day, like I did a daily vlog of the trip, which is on my Instagram if you ever want to take a look at some point. And most days it's me going to like a random gas station, plugging into the PowerPoint outside and using a little blender to make the nutty pudding.
That's amazing.
So good. So to answer your question, really curious, really interesting. I'm quite positive on an energy level, and I'm curious to see what the blood markers actually say. So we digress though. So
keep us posted.
I will definitely keep you posted for sure. So look, let's take a step back for a second. I'd love to get an understanding of like who you are, the context of your early years, and potentially before that, an elevator pitch of like who you are, what you're doing, and how you want to contribute to the world.
Yeah. The summation. So I guess it's really hard to figure out who you are in the world. And so this is my best guess at what I will contribute to the world. I like to think of myself as operations manager for humanity. And that's like a ridiculous role to just self-appoint.
Yeah.
But I've come to the conclusion that no one else is going to appoint themselves or even have a system for appointing someone else. And so in the meantime, I will be the self-appointed operations manager for humanity until someone else comes along and who's better at the job. But the goal here is to investigate what systems can we implement from scratch that level up who we are individually and collectively as a species that are sitting right in plain sight, but just haven't been done. And so Blueprint, the project with Bryan Johnson, is an example of that, where we essentially said, let's make Bryan a public science experiment, an N of one. And we try to implement all of our historical knowledge as a species on science into his biological system as a human body. And let's just make it public. The successes, the failures, what we learned, and make it completely open source for everyone else to build upon.
Brilliant. I love it. There's so many threads I want to go down here. So what made you want to start working on this project to begin with?
I met Bryan. Actually, I'll back up. So I grew up in Australia in a small town. Do you know where Mackay is? Okay. So have you been?
No, I haven't. No, but I know the type.
A lot of people haven't. Yeah. It's like, what, a 12-hour drive from Brisbane north.
Yeah.
So
50,000
pretty
people,
isolated.
Right?
Yeah, I think a little bit more at this point because it's a fly-in, fly-out city for coal mining. And obviously there's a lot of sugarcane farming there as well. But definitely a pretty myopic environment, I would say, to grow up in. But my parents had immigrated from Bosnia before I was born. And so I had this foot in both worlds culturally. And so I always knew I wanted to go after something bigger than what I was growing up in. And eventually I moved to New York, as you have as well. And I was working in the fashion industry. That was what I had trained in as a designer. And I knew I wanted to get into this AI space. And at the time, it was when the first kind of fear around AI taking over the world was cropping up. And I was looking for people out there who were working on this problem of how can we actually navigate this treacherous path forward with AI. And I felt really strongly that the only way would be to merge with AI in some capacity. And Bryan Johnson came up in my email inbox one day from Singularity University. It was a quote that said something about merging with AI. And I thought, that's the only person I'm hearing talking about this. Let me just like DM him. And so I messaged him on like every single platform I could find, didn't hear back. The next year I messaged him again. And like I look back on these messages now and it's so cringy. You know, when you're just like hustling.
Yeah.
And you send like the dumbest shit.
Yeah. I still
that
do.
Was it. That was, yeah, right, exactly. Oh God. Yes. I understand. So I sent these really cringy messages, never heard back for years and years and years. I was moving forward on my fashion journey. The North Face poached me from New York, brought me out to San Francisco. I was helping lead a 70-person design team alongside Tim Hamilton, the VP of design at the time. He's now at Nike as the head of design. And he really gave me a shot. I was 21 at the time when they hired me. Yeah.
Just a
way
baby.
Too young. I don't think they knew how old I was.
Wait, when did you move to New York? At like 19?
Yeah, I think I was 20.
Yeah.
Just turned 20 when I moved to New York.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, because I obviously in Queensland you graduate high school a year early, and so I had got my degree in Australia and then moved over to New York. Yeah, so Tim Hamilton gave me a shot leading this team, and yeah, everything was going really well. I was on this cushy corporate America path, great pay, great work-life balance, everything was great. And I really wanted to work for Bryan. And he was not responding to any messages. And years had gone past, and I just kept messaging him. And eventually an assistant position became available at Kernel, his brain computer interface company, which is where I really wanted to work, because I felt like that was the merge of AI and humanity, was that brain computer interface. And I thought, am I going to take this like pay cut, title cut, you know, get out of cushy corporate America and go work for this random person whom I haven't met before, and move to LA, which, you know, I'm not a big fan of, and I'm still here in LA. And I did it. I applied and I got rejected. And so I messaged him again and I was like, hey, I just applied for your assistant position. You rejected me. Like, come on.
Look at me.
Yeah, right? Like, I've been here for years. And eventually, I think I even like they gave me another shot. They rejected me again. I was like, you guys, like, this is I really think I can do this job. And eventually, I got a one-on-one interview with Bryan. And as soon as we jumped on the Zoom call, it was clear that we were going to work together. We immediately had great rapport. So, yeah, the rest is history. I went to Kernel and moved to LA and became their creative director pretty quickly within the first couple of months. And after Bryan and I would always spend like a couple hours in his office after we'd finish everything up at Kernel, just chatting about the future of humanity. Like, what's next? I was really absorbing
just
his
casually.
thoughts as sponge. just
casually.
Yeah. Like, do we need a new religion in the world? Like, what's the answer here? Right. Yeah, that's definitely like long plan. Really. It's some of us have been called a cult.
And it won't be the last.
Exactly. And so, yeah, one day after I'd like kind of been absorbing all of his philosophy and, you know, what he was looking for in the world, like an idea popped into my mind. And it was on a weekend. I think it was a Saturday. And it was this idea of, wow, we could really do a pretty crazy sci-fi experiment if we took all of his health data, which he was already collecting obsessively, and we published it as an open science experiment. And I was like, this is a crazy idea. This is like the cringe idea that you wouldn't DM someone. And so I couldn't help but like shake it from my mind. So I mocked it up in a Google Slides. I like did a fake dashboard of what it could look like. And I had like latest stool sample, current heart rate per minute, you know, our latest blood work, what I just ate, this complete like dashboard summary of what an AI avatar of Bryan Johnson would be. And I came in to the office Monday, didn't have the courage to pitch it. Wednesday came around, I pitched it, and he was like, no. No. And then a day goes by, he comes back in, and he's like, you know what, maybe let's try it out. And then we just start putting everything online.
That's amazing. So persistence.
Persistence. And I mean, in my case, I think finding someone else out there that sees the same vision as you and is crazy enough to try. And I mean, I think from the moment I had heard of Bryan and met Bryan, I knew that he was someone that was willing to do things that are not societally acceptable, as we've seen from all of our like work on social media. So yeah, I was lucky to come across him.
I love it. Well, I mean, I feel like it doesn't sound like luck to me by any means.
That's fair.
So I have this idea. I have a book idea called Politely Persistent that I'm percolating in my brain at some point that I'll write. And it's a similar concept here that you just knock on the door. Hello, it's me again. Hello, it's me again. And those doors eventually open up. Most of the doors tend to open up. It's a very strange thing. It's as though the universe is saying to you, I'm going to test this for a while. Let's see if you really want it. Like, how much do you actually want this? So it really resonates. So on like an understanding of your early years, like what's led you to be so driven and, persistent? Like, where did this come from?
I don't know. I really don't. I think my parents were just they're working class, immigrated with nothing. And they, my dad still always calls me and says, things like how's everything going at work? Like, do you need anything? Have you been, how's the relationship with the boss going? Like, do you need to give him like a gift or, he's just constantly thinking about the right way to kind of be helpful and create value for other people in the world. And the same for my mum as well. So I think we were just all taught to keep our heads down, work hard, have grit, have persistence. And I guess like my sister being an Olympian now, like must follow the same kind of path, right? Because being an athlete, like it is all about hard work. So like the fact that she's been able to get that level probably shows the same kind of values in her as well, where you just need to keep going, keep pushing. And there's a lot of sacrifice, I think, involved in that process too. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if it's worth doing, it's going to have some sacrifice, because if it was easy, everyone would do it. So, and most people don't want to do it. Do you think that coming from like a first generation immigrant families had a big impact on that? Just your parents have come to a new country. How are their English? Like, is their English good, or was it a bit shaky to begin with? Yeah. My mum learned English here in Australia, so definitely didn't know before. Same as my dad, but my dad still can't write or read English. And even in Bosnian, his home language, I think he finished at like 4th grade or 5th grade or something like that. So really, and my mom's an accountant. My dad was a truck driver out in the coal mines. And so definitely I got to see a large breadth of the world in terms of how most people live. And simultaneously, when I was 8 years old, we went back to Bosnia for the first time, and I met my grandma and my uncles and aunties and everyone like that for the first time. And that, I think, really shook me, because it's such a different life over there. It's beautiful. The community, the village-like environment where everyone's around. I mean, I was all of a sudden surrounded by cousins I didn't know I had, and we're all the same age, and it's a lot of fun. And so I think most people that I meet now in life that I find to be personally really interesting have come from many different worlds, and they happen to be a rare form of like the merging of all those worlds. And I say that that's true, I think, for my background as well, where I really had one foot in each culture, and that allowed me to have a really broad, open-minded perspective of the world. What lessons do you think you can take from the Bosnian community style, a way of living, that you can apply to the Western world, and potentially what you're doing with Blueprint, and potentially how you're looking to change the way that people think about very, very key life and health decisions? I would say that if there's a way to remove finances from the transaction between two individuals, I think here in America, and this is like not a criticism of America, I think that like it's the natural default of where capitalism has taken us. It's our interactions. You go to CVS and you buy something, and that's your interaction with the everyday world. In Bosnia, it's like, hey, my hen needs fertilization. Can I borrow your rooster? Like it's much more of like a community taking care of one another, and an expectation is like, if you need something, I've got you. And it's much more of a a social fabric of value for another human that's at the center of transaction, as opposed to a financial transaction. Of course, that's not the same for everywhere, and I think a lot of places of America have that same social transaction. But I would say that's probably the biggest lesson of what I would love to create in the Western world as we move forward, is like a blend of those two worlds where we can still have community at the center of transaction.
Is there an issue? Well, it sounds like a scale issue, right? So
yeah,
is there a way to build genuine community at scale? Because it seems like that's where it really falls apart.
I think that's a great question. And I think that religion has filled that void previously. You know, do unto others as you do. I don't even know because I'm not religious, but whatever the sayings are, these values. I grew up Catholic and went to Catholic school and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but
I grew up Christian, so I understand.
Yeah. And so you create these systems of maintaining community and values at the core, and then you scale it up like that.
Yeah. So are you basically saying that we need to recreate the like social fabric, community fabric through first principles? Because people are really rejecting religion these days. And I think most people are lost because of that loss of religion in their lives. And this is something I keep coming back to because I'm going through this weird full circle moment where I was younger. I was, you know, in a Christian household for quite a while, and then I rejected it. And now I'm kind of coming back to it because, like, you know what? Maybe these life challenging requirements. Sorry, let me rephrase that. So the problems in the human experience have been problems for a very long time, right? And the solutions have been fleshed out time and time again through various religions. And it's as though now we've rejected all of that and gone, we don't need any of that anymore. We're all different now, but we're not really. We're the same people with the same problems. And it's like we kind of are getting back to the exact same solutions again. But is it becoming repackaged?
Yeah, I was going to say, was it God that brought you back to this place in your early years of Christianity, or is it something else? Because it sounds to me like it's not God.
It's not God.
But maybe it is.
No, it's not God. It's well, okay. So if we flesh this out a little bit more, it began. I'm a civil engineer by trade. I did a civil engineering business degree. I'm very analytical in my thinking. I began the rejection of anything esoteric led me to go and say, all right, if I can't see it and I can't feel it and I can't, logically determine it, it's not real. And then in my life, in various ways, things that have made no sense have happened many times over and over again, to the point where it's either you have to think there's something else happening here that we just can't understand and we can't see and we can't comprehend. And then from there, I go, all right, well, if there is a lot of stuff that I don't understand, and you think of it in a similar way of like an ant's existence is not going to understand so much of the world, what's to say that we aren't that ant in a different way? So now I'm going back to, all right, maybe it's not God, maybe it's not, whatever you call it, whatever you want to call it, but there is something here that has a level of faith required in the systems of the world. Like even in a business, right? You have come up from wherever the hell that idea came from, be it like your synapses like firing in a certain way, in a moment of space because you did it on the weekend, and if you were working 9 to 5 or like in a work that you wouldn't be thinking about it, somewhere some download from somewhere has come to you and gone, hey, this is an idea, and that idea has planted a seed, and that seed has required faith and for you to bring in other people to go, you know what, this could be a thing, and then that proliferates into where you are now. I don't know what to do with that information, but there's a lot more to that than just science. So that's where my head's gotten to now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's like, no, I totally understand what you're saying. It's like no matter what happens to humanity, there's always going to be more unknowns than there are going to be knowns. And the question is, what do we do individually and collectively with all of those unknowns? And previously we answered a religion. Right now we don't really have a good answer. And so I think it leaves people with a lot of existentialism as a result.
And does that manifest in us wanting to live forever? Because there's no afterlife.
That's a good question. I have no idea. That's a good question.
We'll ponder that one.
Yeah.
I love it. So you mentioned your sister was a Olympian. Is she your older sister?
Yeah, she's my older sister. She's 6 years older and she's a basketball player.
I love that. So did you look up to her when you were growing up, and was she always kind of somebody who led you in a direction to achieve more potentially?
Yeah, she was definitely my role model, especially being 6 years older. She was always literally the big sister. She's 6'5", I think. So she's very tall, or in 200 centimeters around about there. Yeah, 190 something.
Yeah.
And so she was literally and figuratively my big sister, and I really did look up to her, and she did sacrifice a lot. She moved out when she was 16 to go off to the AIS in Australia, which is the Institute of Sport, where they train people on this path toward becoming professional athletes. And as a result, obviously, she missed out on a lot of her childhood, or rather had like a different childhood than she was probably destined for before that. And so, yeah, she has always been a big role model and still continues to be.
Yeah, I love that. So immigrant family, somebody who you've looked up to has led you to move to New York on a potential, was that on a whim, do you think? Or was that?
I had decided when I was 8 that I was going to be the world's best fashion designer. Yeah. And so, and I decided when I was 13 that I was going to move to New York after high school. And I got to high school and I realized the tuition in New York was $21,000 per year at the time for out of state. And so I was like, oh, shoot, I can't afford that. And so I went to Melbourne, studied fashion there, and then moved up to New York. So very much a long-winded plan, 7 years in the making or whatever it is.
And then you threw that all away.
That's right.
To chase another little seed that you had planted.
Yes.
So if this all works out and you've played a critical role in this project proliferating to its completion, what does it actually look like?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. I've never actually thought about that. I think it would look like humanity. I like to say that what I like to do in the world is create systems, quirky and weird systems where humanity can understand itself a little bit better. And so I think that what would be missing in this future world, if we just like imagine for a second, would be the confusion that I think a lot of us face on the day-to-day. Like you grow up, you're kind of like shakily given this path by your parents, who turns out they didn't really know what they were doing.
They don't know shit.
Anyway. And once you get to that age, you're like, oh no, they were making these decisions at the same age that I'm making these decisions now. Like they must not have known anything.
Yeah.
And so you're building on this, and then you realize, oh wow, humanity as a whole is scaffolding on pretty shaky grounds too. Like we're all just kind of stumbling into this. And I think that creates this like interesting, we learn to live with a lot of chaos and confusion in our day-to-day lives now. Like, I wake up and I'm like, I feel kind of crappy today. And I'm like, why is that? There's no path to figuring out that information. And so I think like just us understanding ourselves better as a species, like just a little bit more, like 5% would be a big win, I think, for me.
So basically you're suggesting that this can be done through AI-led systems?
That actually, when have you ever seen this? There's I came across this infographic a long time ago, like 10, 15 years ago, and it said like 60 things to try when you feel like crap. And it's like, have you gotten out of your PJs? Have you taken a shower? When was the last time you had a glass of water? Have you gone for a walk outside? I think it was maybe like, all the things to do before you like kill yourself or something like that. It was like really, it was just like, the basics.
Yeah.
And I read it and I was like, oh, well, this is fantastic information. Like no one told me to do these things. This is great. Like go for a walk. I didn't realize that would make you feel so good. Yeah. And so the argument isn't something crazy like AI is going to come and save us. It's that we can do simple things that we don't realize as a species right now to level up everything. So, for example, the prioritization. So, I mean, when I was first growing up, I feel like gyms weren't that big of a deal. And like nowadays, they're much more embedded into the cultural fabric of society. And I think the same is true for sleep. Like we're seeing an uptake in how much people talk about sleep and care about sleep and when they prioritize. And so you can imagine a future where it's like, of course, we all go to bed around the same time so that we all optimize for having quiet hours in the evenings, and we have a different relationship with self. And so it's those minor tweaks like that I actually think will make a big difference, and why I think Blueprint is so important as like a first step on that path.
Have you seen the the meme videos on TikTok or Instagram where it's like a girl saying, "I've got a headache," and then this guy, like her boyfriend, like running down the street chasing her and be like, "Have you drunk any water?" Have you seen that?
No.
It's so good. And she's like running away, and it's like it's kind of like that.
I love that. Yeah, so exactly.
So basically what I've taken from the core elements of Blueprint, because again, I've followed this very, very curiously from a very early stage, is the core of it is quite basic and simple, right? Yes. So what is it that the potential AI scaffolding and frameworks, like why are the AI frameworks and like building all these systems out needed to do such basic things that have such a big impact, right? Like what most of the stuff we're talking about is like eating healthy and moving and stuff that we as humans have done for thousands upon thousands of years, and we've recently lost in the modern world. So what are we actually building frameworks against? Is it just our mind being hijacked or something else? I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's like old wives' tales oftentimes hold the secret to living a good life. Some of it is just nonsense, right? But some of it's like, oh yeah, you should do X, Y, Z, even if it's like 2 degrees removed away from the actual truth. It's a proxy for the truth. And AI will be better at knowing us than we will be at knowing ourselves. And so AI is it's like old wives' tales on steroids, where who knows what will happen, but it has the potential to systematize things in a way that's dramatically better than we can ourselves. It has the potential to know insights about yourself that you could never have figured out yourself by tracking a journal for 20 years across time of every single action you took. Like there is so much potential to leverage the ability to hold information and synthesize it and find patterns.
Okay, so it's pattern. It's taking in much more data and much more data points that we can otherwise not do individually, to allow us to then give us the framework of making better decisions. But at the end of the day, we need to make those decisions. We need to choose to want to go down that pathway. So it still comes down to the human at the end of it saying, I want this. So is there, where does the line end?
Yes, that is true. The weird thing about being a human is you can't unlearn or unknow things that come across your sensory experience. So, for example, once you know how damaging the sun is, it's very hard to ignore that information every time you go into the sun afterwards. Actually, in like Bryan and I, when we're talking about like posts and that kind of stuff, we talk about like SEO for the mind. It's like your mind is a ChatGPT and it conjures up things depending on how sticky it is. And there are pieces of information that are more sticky than others. So like when I go out into the sun now, I'm like, okay, it's probably doing damage to me right now.
I'm dying.
I can't help but know that. Right, so I'm actually a vampire.
Yeah.
And then you can make the decision based on that, but it becomes much more difficult once the knowledge is in front of your eyes. So yes, there is decision making, but honestly, just having information at your fingertips is the first step in being able to make that decision.
Information and the ability to interpret that information into appropriate lessons and next steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, and if we've learned anything from all the cognitive bias trainings and information and proliferation out
Which
there,
we haven't.
is that we've learned that we're very unaware of the things that make our brain conjure up new information. And so it's all just like a black box. And so the more you can input it with correct information, the better outputs it'll be without you even trying.
What do you think the value of intuition versus systems is in this space?
See, I see AI as a super intuitive machine. Intuition for me means conclusions that you don't know where they came from, that are based on some subset of data that you don't know what it is, but it's a conclusion nonetheless that has been conjured up. Whether it's good or bad or true or false, like not really factored into it. But AI is the same thing. We have no way to know if AI is correct about mathematical problems, unless you like do the work of like actually calculating it.
Yeah.
But there's a level of like, okay, like that's the intuition of the AI. Like, is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. It's kind of the same for me too. So I actually really do respect intuition a lot, but I also question it pretty heavily. It's a balance, right? You need to find, ideally a way to not completely live by intuition, but I do trust my intuition a lot too.
So let's talk about that for a moment, because I think your intuition led you to New York. Your intuition led you to meet Bryan. But then you're also saying that somewhere along the line, I need to reject my intuition for data. So how do you reconcile those two things? And have you thought about a framework of when it is appropriate to be focusing on your intuition versus when it is appropriate to be focusing on the data? Because I struggle with this. I really struggle with this.
Yeah. Ironically, it's building an intuition around when your intuition is right and when it's wrong.
It's a meta intuition.
Right. And so I do think you learn yourself pretty well across the years. And I know there are areas in my life where I'm going to be wrong.
What are they?
Like what comes to mind? Yeah, I know. So what comes to mind is like, in personal relationships, I am clouded by jealousy occasionally. And so I'll notice myself having incorrect intuitions about something based on this like pattern of maybe I'm jealous in the situations that's informing my intuition more than I recognize. But in general, my intuition in like these 5 categories, like what's going to go viral on social media, is actually pretty spot on most of the time, obviously not all the time, but that you eventually figure out where you make the same mistakes over and over again. You realize like, okay, I'm not trustworthy in this area.
Where do you think that jealousy came from?
That's a great question. But part of me wonders whether or not there's just like a normal level of just human to human. Yeah, that's where you end up. I think a big reason I'm getting into this whole like understanding space and the AI space and all that kind of stuff is because I think that like language itself is really fallible. Like the ability, I'm trying really hard to communicate to you right now, Adam.
Yeah.
But it's like
I think
probably
you're doing
working
a good
like
job.
20. It's probably working 20% of the time of like what my neurons are actually trying to get out.
Yeah.
And so that process of synthesizing what's going on in my head, making it into words, then pushing it out, you interpret it, then blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty low fidelity. And so I think that being aware of that, there's always an element of I am an individual, but I'm also a collective. And I think that creates a lot of friction. So that's what leads to things like jealousy, trust, this kind of stuff. And I'm acutely aware of this, I think probably more than the average person. Yeah.
Okay. So what's an example of something like that occurring, and how have you built a framework around it to minimize it occurring moving forward on the jealousy front, as an example?
I think anytime that I question my intuition, the kind of like crappy way of figuring out whether or not you're spot on or not is to do reality testing. So, okay, if that was true, that would mean this is true. And then let's figure out, is that true? And then you try and deduce from around that. So I'd say that's probably that it's not a very good solution. This is another example of like, if we can figure out when to go to bed on time, what to eat, all that kind of stuff, it would be great to like level up to these other areas.
Well, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for AI.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
the bottom right now.
Yeah.
We actually might be at the bottom. Like I've never thought of it that way before, but it's kind of where we are at.
For sure. Wow,
I just blew my own mind.
Good job.
Oh, I love that. Well, one little comment that you made before around the old wives' tales, religion is also the equivalent of the old wives' tales. And I heard a saying from a guy named, do you know Naval Ravikant? Mm-hmm. So he said, the older the problem, the older the solution. I read that somewhere, which I found really, really interesting. So that's where
that is a great quote.
Quite curious on the basics, like survival is a pretty old human problem. And the solutions are coming, we've gone through all this data, we spent all this money, and the solutions are the same, almost the same shit from thousands of years ago, that Bryan talks about power laws, you're right. A lot of the power laws things are go to sleep on time, eat well, get exercise. They're just super basic. So again, that ties back into my thought of living a good life and an appropriate life that leads to contentment and success financially and success in family is not a new problem. So therefore, going back to why I'm going back to religion again as a potential solution, there are thousands upon thousands of years of frameworked thinking once you get through the stories, and the stories are just an ability to communicate an idea in these different texts, that most of which you take out the geographic specifics, like I don't 100% know if this is true, but I heard somewhere that, Muslims don't eat pork because pork was, you had a higher chance of getting sick in that part of the world because of it. So it became a dirty meat. But you don't have that in Christianity because it's a different set of circumstances. But the core, you get these core frameworks that are pretty similar, and it's like, treat people kindly, give to the poor, if you're going to get married, like be truthful, blah, 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 blah. It's all the same shit that creates a similar framework across a wide variety of, different societies. So I didn't really have a point there. I just was like, there was a little curious note that I noticed.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like Naval's comment kind of threw me a little bit, because that's a really, succinct way to summarize things. But occasionally things come along that really revolutionize whatever the problem is at hand. So, leveraging new technologies in a completely new way, and all of a sudden we can figure out protein folding. And so it's like those original solutions are hacks or shortcuts for the problem at hand. But occasionally things will come along that will just completely disrupt the problem at hand. And I hope for longevity, for aging, and for also just like the system of being a human, that AI will do that for us. So for example, like gene therapy is something that, if that all comes to fruition in an incredible way, could be really, that could be really revolutionary. And maybe the answer won't be get 8 hours of sleep, which is a really good hack in the meantime.
Well, I think you're saying something completely new, which is it's no longer an old problem. It's a completely different set of circumstances. It's a new problem with a completely new set of solutions. And that's a big thing, right? The big thing that probably doesn't support religion and the traditional ways of thinking is we are no longer in hunter-gatherer tribes. We are in massive metropolises with access to IV drip dopamine in so many different ways that short circuit our brains. That is not an old traditional way of living. So we have to come up with better ways. And I think the autonomous self concept is really interesting because you need to get away from all of these cheap dopamine producing activities because they will destroy you. And they are designed at your peril on purpose. Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's definitely something there. And, you know, we're not talking about simple things here. We're talking about like deep philosophical points on how to live life as a human in the modern age. These are not things that are solved very easily. Like, it's not like Plato or Socrates would have just been like, you know, I've got it all figured out. It's discourse. It's intelligent people going at odds against each other, talking, exploring ideas, like taking data, changing thought process, being wrong again, and we slowly move in a direction that we need to move. Anyway,
definitely. And there's not many projects out there that are trying to tackle this level of problem that's like so sticky and hairy and uncomfortable to look at. And so that's why like Blueprint for me is so exciting to work on, because it's one of the few projects out there that'll try to tackle these insane questions to pose.
It's a big undertaking.
Yeah,
it's cool. It's really cool. Well, I mean, good luck. Like, you've got my vote. I'm along for the ride. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Let's take we've dug into the philosophy for quite a while. I think you are a brilliant marketer, and I want to tap into that conversation a little bit more. So you mentioned that storytelling is the most important thing to make ideas become sticky, and we've done this since the dawn of time. Like, don't go and like, here's a dragon and here's a story about a dragon, and that dragon is just a metaphor for, I don't know, the plague or something. Like, so run me through, from your experience developing the Blueprint and Bryan Johnson's personal brand, and it looks like now potentially your personal brand as your project starts to take its own path, like the 2 or 3 80-20 techniques that you've noticed really help to proliferate ideas in content creation, in personal brand, in, you know, building a business's brand, and flourishing of ideas.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me, I'd always heard storytelling and just had no idea what that meant. Like, what is storytelling? How do you do that? Right, right. I totally relate to that, and it almost feels like magic when it's like told in these ways, and it's abstract. And how do you think about it? So I think for me, to be clear for everyone listening at home, this is not my area of expertise. I was someone who had no confidence in this space at all. And over the last 2 years has had incredible success, and finally feels like I have my grasp on what works and what doesn't work for virality and storytelling. So there is hope. I really didn't think there was hope for me at the start of this, but there is hope. If you're wondering, yes, there's hope. I think the key difference is that we're living in a completely different environment today than we were previously. So I kind of like to think of the modern storytelling world as psychological terrorism in a way, because previously, in order to tell a story to a large number of people, you had to have some status in the world. You had to be a politician or a celebrity, have a platform in some capacity. Now it's more like you need to hit a combo code on a PlayStation device, and you can just talk to everyone in the world. Like, if you hit the right buttons, like, you can talk to everyone. So it's a completely flipped model for how we think about communicating. It's really wild. I always think, like, when I walk down the street and I hear an ambulance going off or a car alarm going off, it's like we've built this system where we can disrupt the lives of like 1,000 people in a kilometer square like radius, where they hear the car going like, help, like, come look at me and help me. There's like, and it's like, how do we allow that to happen? Like, I don't know why that's like the number one priority for everyone in the network. Like, ambulances make sense, but like a car alarm, like, really? I don't know. So I feel like social media is the same, where the thing that really changed it, this is how I like to communicate it, is like, imagine you're going to a nightclub and you walk up and there's a bouncer, and that bouncer, their job is, there's like some clubs in like Germany and stuff where like the Bergheim, where like you're filtered in or out. Like depending on how you show up, like if you look cool, they'll let you in. If you don't, you're sent home.
Have you been to
And like
Bergheim?
it's a really competitive. I haven't. Have you?
Yeah, I've been. Yeah.
Did you get in?
Yeah, I got in. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So
I've done a
you were
lot.
successful.
I'm sure at some point when we speak off air, you know, there's a lot of stories. It's been a wild life
juicy
so far.
behind the scenes.
It's been a wild life. Anyway, continue.
Okay. So the bouncer has this job of like, do you get in or do you not? And so your job is to please the bouncer. As like, and this isn't, I'm not saying this is moral, good, bad, I don't really, that's not the conversation. It's like, this is the reality. The algorithm is the bouncer. And so your job is to please the algorithm. So you need to get to know, what is the algorithm like? What does it doesn't like? And you realize that like, it's actually there to just get a job done. It's not personal. It's trying to create value for the people inside the club. It wants to make a really fun experience.
Yeah.
And like paid marketing is like you go in and you advertise banners inside the club. Like organic or viral marketing is like you want to be in there dancing with everyone, the topic of the conversation, like having a good time. And so here are the lessons for how to get inside the club and to convince the bouncer algorithm to let you in. It's tell a story that people want to talk about. That's it. So what is the playground gossip? That's it. It's like love, it's lust, it's happiness, it's fear, it's hatred. This is why we have so many problems on social media, because it's very simple, large emotions told in very simple, understandable ways. So, yeah.
So how is that? What's an example of that in the case of the Blueprint and Bryan Johnson's
So
project?
when we first started Blueprint, as you know, we were publishing newsletters weekly. We had a website where we were publishing all these updates, and it was like, my lung capacity on VEF has dropped by 2% over the last 2 months. And we were publishing like for like a year or something. Nobody cared. Everybody was just like, this like weird project, or like, we don't even understand what you're talking about. Like none of it matters. And so slowly across time, we've like learned, what do people care about? And one of the big things, for example, is Bryan's nighttime erection score. That's the kind of thing that people want to gossip about, talk about. You can't shake that information from your brain. We're such primitive human beings. And so, you know, it's like the Trojan horse. Like you talk about nighttime erections, and then, oh, actually, to get good nighttime erections, you need 9 hours in bed, 8 hours of sleep. Like that's the conversation. It can't be some esoteric high level thing where people are like, I don't really care. I don't want to spend the time and energy into even understanding what you're talking about. Just like, give me something entertaining, simple, enjoyable, and I'll let you into the club.
So when did the nighttime erection genius idea become a thing, and how did you guys get to that point?
Well, it's a really actually really like organic story. Like Bryan just Bryan noticed that he was having more nighttime erections after starting a HiFEMS device therapy, which essentially is like electromagnetic pulses in the body. So it's like, if you've ever seen like the ab machine where you put it on a little machine and it tense the muscles. Yeah. Same thing, but women can do that for the pelvic floor. And so he had the device at his house, and he was doing some other therapy and decided to like double up at the same time, because you can do that and make it more efficient. And so he started doing that and noticed he was having more nighttime erections. And we thought, wow, that's going to make some really good content. And it did.
So run me through the thing. It's a pelvic floor.
Yeah. It's like a little circle.
Yeah. Is that the thing that he lies on, and it's an ab cruncher thing, or is that something else?
Same device, but different placement. Same like machine, but one of them you put on your abs and the other one you sit on. And so it's like, yep.
Have you used it?
So I actually haven't. I should.
You should use it.
I need to know what it's like.
You're like, this is so funny.
I hear that you kind of need to like move your body around to find like the right spot. And once you know, you know. No one needs to tell you, like that's the right spot. So yeah, as you strengthen that, then he experienced more nighttime erections. And like we joke, but that's the other thing I really find inspiring about Blueprints. Like nothing's off the table. We talk about everything from stool to erections to blood to sleep. Like it's all up for grabs, and so much of societal norms are like buried because we're weirdly taboo about talking about them. And I think it's great that we're out there talking about these random things.
I love it. I love it. So if you were trying to tell a story, but you weren't worth hundreds of millions of dollars and doing some amazing pioneering work in multiple, parts of the world, how could you framework that thinking to actually still be effective?
It's always easier when you're talking about something like on the ground. So if you have something that you want to, like if you have some content that you're trying to post and you want to kind of reframe it, I would love to know what it is. I would do that exercise with you. I find it really entertaining. But you just kind of want to understand what's going on. Like, for example, my friend has a startup in the ed tech space. So it's essentially like a little device that is like learning for kids on a little like iPad-like device. And it's like teaching them English and all that kind of stuff. And like, that's such a serious world. And it'd be so easy to be like, make your kid more educated and smart and like blah, 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 blah. Like, but like really what it is, it's like, probably the viral thing in there would be more like speaking to the mothers who feel like their husbands are letting them down and being like, you deserve the night off and the glass of red wine. Like, put this device in front of your kid, like, or leaning into the like iPad kid storytelling and just being like, at least your iPad kid will be like en route for a Nobel Prize or something like that. Like totally leaning into like the things that people talk about, like when all the mothers get together in a circle after hours when they've got their nannies or whatever, and they're like, talking about something and kind of gossiping. Like that's the thing you want to tap into for storytelling.
So these are very old human interactions, really. Like, well, the thought process is, who is the person who's actually genuinely interested in that piece of that program or whatever the item is, and that's not the child, that's the mum. The mum's going to be buying that. And then how do they proliferate their ideas? They proliferate their ideas talking to the other mums on the like at the front of school with the prams. So it's like, how do you get into that frame of thinking? So that makes sense.
Yeah. And then like communicating as simply as possible.
Yeah. So
I think so frequently brands are like, our device is superior to all other devices. And it's like, you kind of just want to say like the other brands are shit, like you want to be that like simple in your communication. Like everyone can understand it. You're not distancing yourself from the consumer. You're right there with them. And then communicating again, some emotion that's like a simple emotion. Like the more complex you get, the more you narrow your market to a smaller and smaller audience. And like, by the way, like everything I'm talking about is like for large, like viral marketing type thing. But a lot of people like thrive in small business spaces or want to do more nuanced messaging. And that's great. It's just, a different game.
Well, I think it's all top. It's like a top of funnel approach to get to,
right.
Actual sales at the end of the day. And that's kind of the goal, or sales or updating a message for someone, to make an idea sticky. So you spoke about, wanting to potentially do the storytelling exercise. I'm happy to do that on air if you want. So what were you thinking?
Let's do it.
What do I need to have? Well, let's do the podcast as an example. Like right now we are posting 5-6 clips a week. We're posting an episode a week, and it's a grind. It's a grind. And really trying to figure out how to cut through the noise, because there's so many podcasts doing so many clips. And like you've got, you've been on Diary of a CEO, like there's guys that are taking all the attention. So in my head, I'm like, how do I cut through the noise in a podcast that doesn't have the world's best people every week, and it doesn't have massive budgets for production? And I don't have a massive following either, so it's, that's where that's at.
What's your goal is reach? Like, is your ultimate goal to get your individual brand to a, like, let's just say multi-million follower platform? Just really high level. Like, what's the goal?
The goal is, well, I mean, the highest level goal is to impact people's thinking in a positive way in the pillars of health, money, and like just general philosophy and like wisdom about the world. So that's my goal, is to positively change how people think about their lives and the way they live. And then the second thing is ideally that's getting to as many people as possibly. Like getting to the whole planet, the whole English speaking planet to begin with is a great start, because that will touch everybody. But how I get there, I have no fucking idea.
Totally. In today's world, if I was you, and again, like this, I have a very narrow way of looking at things, just given where my background is. So take it with a grain of salt. I would look at your podcast as a shorts production machine. And so much of our conversation today is going to be so hard to cut up into shorts. So I would reformat the entire podcast and do it in a way where it's just like, this is a shorts production machine. It's a Trojan horse for getting shorts out there, because you're trying to reach a bunch of people. And so even things like, you and I could have had a conversation beforehand and said, we're going to answer I'm going to answer every single question. Like, Kate, hi, I'm Adam. Kate, can you, when you respond, answer all of my questions in a sentence format? So instead of responding like, hey, what are your top 5 tips for sleep? I would say, instead of being like, hey, you should, have blue light blocking glasses, I would say, my top 5 like tips for perfect sleep are blue light blocking glasses, blah, 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 blah. So like optimizing for the format, like, that there's a combo code that you need to play for shorts. Create the podcast around that combo code, and then you'll just fill it with the content that you want to fill it for. So in this case, it's like helping people for health and wellness. Well, we know the combo code on shorts, for example, is like listicles work really well. So is there a way that you can get your guests to fit that combo code by teeing them up in a way that they deliver the content that you need to create that virality?
Is that what you've seen from the experience of the way the major successful podcasters operate, or is that just a thought process that you have kind of come to in first principles?
More the latter. But I think the same things apply. So, like, a lot of podcasts are coming at this from a podcast standpoint, right? Which makes sense. And so you're optimizing for a podcast. I don't know if that's the best route to get into the space now. Like, in my mind, I'd rather build a really large IG, TikTok, and YouTube, because like YouTube Shorts really funnel to YouTube subscribers. I would build that audience so that you can get really high quality guests, and then you play the podcast game. It's really hard to play podcast game unless you're getting your guests' audience reach. So if they've got small followings, it's quite hard because you're having to really build an algorithm. The algorithm is like, this is long, boring content.
Yeah,
you're not on to the club. This is not quick enough. This is not like high energy enough. And so my point being, if you're starting out in the podcast space and you don't have a ton of money and you're not trying to do this high production and you're not able to hire like 10 people to work on this, you play the short-term game, build the followers, then convert it to a long-term podcast. So then going back to your original question, because you're like, hey, I'm looking at all these podcast people out there, they're doing a completely different thing. People like Joe Rogan, they're leaning on his entertainment value and his experience in that space of being a really good host, and also the reach of all the other guests. Like, he's able to pull in all these incredible guests, obviously. And then you look at someone like Stephen Bartlett with Diary of a CEO, and he is playing the podcast game, but he's certainly optimizing for the algorithm. So when he sits, he's got a little, this is from insider knowledge of, I don't think he would mind me I don't think he mind me saying this because I think it's really impressive. But he has an ability to, underneath the table, hit a button whenever an interesting soundbite is said.
What?
And so he's acutely aware of what information needs to go at the start of the video to then hook people in to watch the rest of the video. And the trailer that he's like revolutionized, I think, the podcast space.
Yeah.
You know, having this really incredible hype reel at the start of the video, having great thumbnails with a great design, like really optimizing for the algorithm. And so he's played the like, he's not doing the short form game necessarily as his entry point, like I was suggesting for you, but he's certainly playing the YouTube and algorithm optimization game by focusing really intensely in that first 10 minutes of content so that you watch the rest. And so like, it depends on what kind of game. If you really want to go really headlong into the podcast space, like that makes sense. If I was starting out now and I didn't have like a ton of money to invest in podcasts, I would do the reels as it's just podcasts. Long form podcast is a Trojan horse to get real content.
It's a fine. I'd love to figure out the actual specific technique that he's using to hit those clips, because I'm sure there's a going into a computer and then it's clipping on the computer. But you can do so. Basically, what you're saying is interesting moments in time. He'll mark as a clip, and then his editors will then go, oh, okay, he's marked 20 different clips. Therefore, I need to spend extra time and energy thinking about this because the host has found something in there. He knows it's there. Therefore, I need to find it. And when I find it, it should make for a better piece of content. Is that kind of the framework of thinking that you had?
Yeah, and I'm sure he would also give a lot of credit to his editors in the sense that like they have their own expertise in storytelling, and so they might see this clip and be like, you know, Stephen's like, fast track this for me so that I can find this information, or found it like might be an interesting hook or something like that, and I'm going to build a storytelling element around it.
It's funny. You go.
No, you go. You're good.
I was just gonna say I've been following his stuff as well for a little while. Like I love his interviewing style. He's a very, very solid interviewer. And I've been watching the clips because I, model the successful people. And one of the clips was hilarious. Someone along the line came up with the idea of doing that like game on the left hand side, like on the bottom of the clip. So the clip's on the top, and then you've got that like game of like people jumping, the train game where like people how do I explain this? It's like, there'll be some clear information on the top half, and then there's someone's playing a random like mobile game, and it's like you have to dodge all of the trains, and you surely you've seen something like this before. No?
Probably, yes. It's like,
Basically, it's like an ADHD like focus thing. It's like people look at that and they focus on the key piece of information, but they're actually just looking at someone playing this weird game.
That's amazing.
And everyone was roasting him in the comments to do this, about doing this. But then I looked at the average reel numbers, and, some of his reels go viral, but most of them, they don't go viral. Like that page doesn't do big numbers, like for how big the page is, like 10,000, 20,000 views for a 500,000 Instagram page or something. But this one had like 200,000. So I found it funny that people were roasting him for doing it, but the views were crazy.
Yeah, because they're gossiping in the comments. They're gossiping. They're saying this is dumb or this is genius or whatever it is. Like it's exactly the kind of code that goes viral.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fine line to try and maintain a high level of integrity, and also to develop out really quality long form discussions. Because you don't want to take away, like there's nothing worse in this world, I feel like, than just all clickbait. Because there needs to be the substance behind it. So it's a fine line. If you think about any other ways to approach this as well, I'm like all ears, because I'm still very early stages in all of this. So it's towing that line of virality versus depth. Because I'd be afraid
virality. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
No, I'd just be afraid that if I built an audience of just virality only, and I didn't have the depth behind it, the audience you're building is not the audience, like, and what you're actually saying and doing is not, it's to the core mission. It's just
totally,
it becomes TMZ basically.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's like for me, money cannot motivate me for the life of me. Like there's been plenty of opportunities to like make a ton of money. It's like, I just can't. That for me is the same thing. It's like virality without substance, like making money without substance. Like it's just not long-term viable. It's just a dead end.
Of course, of course. So moving forward, I'm conscious of your time. You mentioned that you don't like being in front of the camera in previous kind of conversations, yet here we are. So you've taken a big role in something that's not, it's quite polarizing. How have you gone settling into that world, and why did you do that?
I don't know. It was a bad decision. I'm just kidding.
Are you okay? Do you need a hug?
Yeah. I do need a hug. I would really love a hug.
I would give you a hug if I was in LA. So
yeah, my friend says, like, when he's saying goodbye to people, he says, like, feel hugged, and I love that. It's so that. It's like, feel hugged.
Yeah, feel hugged.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really, really difficult. It's definitely not my forte. I like having these kinds of conversations where we're talking about something else. I really don't like talking about myself. So like when we're talking about like ideas or ways to make things go viral, I'm like so there and really love having those kind of brainstorming sessions. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm doing it because it's a really hard and uncomfortable thing to do. And I know that it's necessary as a step along my trajectory as a human to create the most value for humanity. And so it's just like something I'm just like, okay, I got to get through this.
Got to figure it out. Yeah. Okay. I understand. And what has been the biggest positive surprise you've taken from it so far?
Being on camera.
Just making that decision to go, you know what, I'm going to do this. And something that's popped out that you've gone, wow, I didn't expect that to happen, but I love this. And I'm glad that I've taken that leap, that potential, got past that fear and taken that big leap.
I will say, this is like really ugly of an answer, but I will say that I feel like power is accumulated either through wealth, through, so like becoming successful, like owning a bunch of money, through knowledge, so having expertise like a scientist or something like that, or through social status, so becoming an influencer or something like that. So it's definitely like raw power. And I've noticed that has a really big impact in the way that people interact and treat me and the doors it opens and everything like that. So I would say that that's probably the reality of like, it's quite helpful to have a public presence because things happen as a result and you get a little bit more room. You don't need to work as hard to get your foot in the door. And I think something that comes alongside with that is like, for example, people still to this day think that I'm Bryan's assistant. Whenever I'm around him, they'll just make that assumption that that's my role because I'm a young female and I'm in this like, position next to someone who's an older white guy who's powerful and wealthy and all this kind of stuff. And I would say that like, it's been nice that that's slowly eroded across time. And I'm no longer having to be like, no, I'm not his assistant. And nothing against being an assistant. I think, I was at some point and it's a wonderful role. But when you work really hard and there's a lot of sacrifice and you've accumulated these assets, it's like you want to be acknowledged for that. And it has been hard at times to not get that. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that just comes with the reps and telling your story a little bit more succinctly so people don't get a chance to assume anything because they already know. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yes. So that's another reason why I'm just like, I got to persevere and get through this really uncomfortable public thing.
Well, I think you're doing a good job. So this has been a great conversation. You've absolutely killed this. So, what's it like being immersed in a world filled with world-class performers, and how has that impacted your view on the world and how you live now? Because you are in an interesting world right now.
That's true. I forget. You definitely get used to things. Like it just becomes normal. I would say that I would say like, as I've like progressed through social status of like success, there's a class of folks that, they're successful, but they're really just playing social games of kind of reassurance from approval from their peers. But when you really get to this echelon of people who are like producing things out there in the world, whether it's new ideas, new philosophies, businesses, I think most of the folks at that level are just really hardworking, mostly kind individuals that aren't there to show off or impress you or anything like that. And it's a very, I find it a very comforting environment actually, because like you get into a room with these people and you're like, all right, what are we going to do? Like, like, what fun thought experiments are we going to throw out here? What cool things can we start as a group? Like, it's a very playful environment, I find.
So they just get shit done and they do it from a place of
Yes.
genuine confidence, as opposed to needing to be approved by those around them through status games.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. What do you think sets them apart, and why are some people status led and why are some people more like, I guess, confident and mission led?
Yeah, I think it depends on what your objectives are. So that's why I was like, are you trying to make money? Are you trying to accumulate power? Or are you just unable to do anything else? So I think that people at that like really talented level are just unable to do anything else. Like that is the air they breathe. They produce stuff.
Yeah.
They can't
help it. Yeah. It's just an anxious desire to make things.
Yes,
I get
exactly.
that. So how have you handled hate? Like,
I love it. That's so weird. I sound like Bryan.
Give me more. It fuels me.
I love it. I think for different reasons from Bryan. I've always like gone through the world, and I can like I've never been able to fit in socially in the group, in the room.
Yeah.
And I've always found like growing up, like going to a Catholic girls' school, it's like, it's a war zone. And I always felt it was so strange that people would say all these things behind closed doors, and you never really got to actually know face to face what people are thinking. So what I love about the comment section is just like, it's just raw human thought. And I'm like, cool, at least we now know and we can engage and I can like respond to you about this and like, you know, help clarify things or learn from what you're saying. So for example, like in the Diary of a CEO podcast, a lot of the comments were like, she has such intense vocal fry. And I didn't even know what vocal fry was.
What is that?
And then it's when I do it all the time. It's where I'm going to try and do it now. Like where you drop into this like low,
okay.
that.
Yeah. Vocal fry, new word.
Vocal fry. Right. And it really was fun to like educate myself on that and learn, okay, if I want to stop doing that, how could I? Can I practice that? And then like learning and up-leveling myself as a result of what I hear in the comments. And then also learning about like the historical information around that. So for example, there's like a big body of knowledge saying that, you know, young women get attacked for this vocal fry way more frequently than men of any age do. And they wonder like, is that because there's some sort of like social thing happening here that is like punishing women? And it's like, that's really interesting. Do I want to play into that? Do I not? So like, there's like so many things that came out of that one, you know, idea that I saw in the comments that I'm so grateful for knowing about now. And I think that's just like, you see that endlessly. Like even if one person says something in the comments, like you can learn from that experience. And as long as you're willing to disregard it or choose not to take it in, like they'll say something like, so like I remember one comment was like the oh, she's a CMO and yet she knows nothing about this, like something I said and like where we ship to as a brand.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's hilarious. Like I feel so good about the fact that I don't know. It's like I'm so hands off that I'm like, I don't really know what we ship to. Like, it's not a big deal to me, you know, like there's a list online. I'm not going to memorize that in my head. And so as long as you're able to detach yourself from certain ideas and concepts and topics and then take in whatever you do want to take in, I think it's a fantastic resource.
I am inclined to agree. I think you put yourself in the content space, you put yourself out for the world's judgment and critique. And sometimes it's valuable, but a lot of the times, you know, people have opinions and people's opinions on the internet are much more stream of consciousness than they would be in person. Like I've previously ran a bunch of festivals and events in Australia, and a couple of times we've made some mistakes and things have gone wrong and people are upset. And the comments in some like posts have just been savage. And I did an exercise where I personally contacted every single person who complained, and I was like, hey, here's my number, call me. And 80% of I think only one person told me to fuck off. But the rest, we got on a call,
cool.
We spoke, and what was said and then what was said on text and what was said on a call were worlds apart. And most of the people ended up apologizing for the comments they made at the time. And it was a really, really positive kind of outcome. So I think the lesson that I took there as well. I mean, I'm not at the scale of that you are, but it's kind of been a training ground for this exact same thing. It's like, is there something of substance that you can take out of that comment? Great, take it. If not, is that person somebody that you potentially look up to or want to emulate in your life? Great, then consider it. Consider what they're trying to say. If not, fuck it. Who cares? Let it go. Let it be what it is.
Adam, just like one quick note on that is like, you just visualize like a tree map of ways to think about online hate. Like that's a really fun gossipy level, like piece of information that you could publish as content. Like, you know, it's like how to deal with the haters, or like someone tells you to fuck off, like here's how to think about it. Yeah. I might actually add that to my short form list of things to do. I like it. Yes, I love that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
then just like open with the fuck off comment, or whatever the most like juicy, horrible comment is that you've gotten. Yeah.
Oh damn. Yeah, it's a wild world out there. What were you gonna say?
It really is. No, just that I hope I can swear on this.
Oh, you can definitely swear. I mean, at this point, it's too far gone. So I love it. No, don't apologize. It's okay. So, look, there was a lot more I would love to speak to you about, but I think we're getting to the tail end of this. So I'd love to do a few rapid fire things, and I'll get out of your hair.
Okay, sounds
cool.
good.
What's the biggest thing you've changed your mind on in the last 2 years?
Righteousness. I was definitely very righteous about things. So I would think that things are right and wrong, and I would hold them very strongly in my mind. And now I realize that nothing matters. It's all play. Just relax.
Yeah. I feel like you get much more effective the less tied to ideas you are, because you become a lot more curious about why people say what they say and what they've got behind this, fallible style of communication that you briefly mentioned earlier. So
right. Yes.
What's the kindest thing anybody's ever done for you?
When I was being profiled for Time magazine, which was the first interview I'd ever done with a journalist, first and only interview I've ever done with a journalist.
That's not a bad one to start with.
Let me start again. When I was being profiled for Time magazine, which was the first interview I've ever done with a journalist, so it was very high stakes with no experience, no media training. A really good friend of mine, Robert, he would get on the phone with me every day and spend an hour with me, and he would prep beforehand, pretending to be this journalist, researching this journalist, and then like embodying this journalist, and then he would interview me over the phone. Yeah, and it was the most helpful, thoughtful thing that someone could do, because I was able to practice and get in reps, and he really put his heart and soul into it. And he's like a physicist, by the way, like with a Ivy League degree and all that kind of stuff. And so to get his time was very valuable. And so I think that was the kindest thing that anyone's done for me.
I love that. That's a really, really sweet story. What a legend. We love Robert.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Love you, Robert.
Yeah.
Wait, also, Robert is also the feel-hugged guy.
Seems like a very, very nice man. I mean, I'll meet Robert one day. Where does he live? Yes. Where is he from?
He's out here in LA. He's from Germany.
Never gone to LA.
I'm sure he'll be in New York at some point.
Sounds good. This is probably quite relevant to Blueprint, but what's the ideal morning and evening routine for you?
My ideal morning and evening routine would be being alone. I love my quiet space. I just want to be like undisturbed, have no meetings on my calendar, just have pure open time. And then obviously like I wake up, I do my morning routine type things, which include the Blueprint stuff, my longevity mix that you're drinking right now. And then I'm just doing deep work. I'm just at my computer and I get to catch up on everything.
So you'll wake up, let's get a little bit more granular on that.
If I'm ideal, it would be I wake up, I go on a weighted walk, clear my head. Yeah. Have you ever?
No, I love this.
It's so great.
So you just buy like a weight vest?
Yes, exactly. I can send you the one that I have, which is like phenomenal because it really distributes. Because you can get weighted vests that really are too heavy on your shoulders, for example, and it causes bad posture. This one like really wraps around your torso area, so it distributes it quite well. But yeah, I'd go on a weighted walk before the UV index is too high.
Of course.
And then I'd come back. I would...
so is this like 6 a.m., you're up at 5, you're up at 6? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, ideally before it's too high UV, like before 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And then I'm having my longevity mix, my 8 pills, my olive oil, my nutty pudding, and then I'm going into my day and I'm getting to focus heads down and do my deep work. So I'm producing something of high intensity and focus and value. The kind of thing where you feel like you're pushing a ball up a hill and you just need to like get through it.
And then are you working out? Like what's happening when you're working out?
Yeah.
Ideally?
And my ideal would be like working out maybe around like midday. I'm not a big like morning. Yeah. Ideally.
Okay, cool.
And then not too late in the day so it doesn't disrupt your sleep.
Yeah.
And then finish. Yeah. Go ahead.
No. I'm all good.
Ideally finishing all my food by like 3 p.m. at the latest. And then having a big window before bed. And then doing my wind down routine. Ideally no blue light, a few hours before bed, maybe reading right before bed and then going to sleep.
Cool. Love it. What has been your favorite failure?
When I was in New York, I don't even want to pitch this as a failure. Let's skip this one because I don't know. Everything feels like it's not a failure enough to be a failure.
Idea.
Yeah, exactly. I had a short film series with a bunch of my really good friends in New York called Project Girl, and it didn't like get off the ground or really go anywhere. But we made a lot of progress within that world, and I'd never been in film before. I guess this is like way before thinking about content and storytelling. So I was like, it's so funny now to think that I've like kind of gone full circle. But it was so much fun to work with friends and to just like produce content. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the exact point of that question because the goal is to get something that you thought wouldn't work and then something in some way along the line it's helped. So it sounds like that was good. And what advice would you give yourself from 10 years ago?
That you are going to have great ideas and just stick to them and let go of what you perceive everyone else to be thinking. Be weird, be crazy, be hated. Let people think of you as dumb. Just do it. You have great ideas. That's what I would say.
You do have great ideas.
Thank you. I still need to tell myself this.
That's all right. That's what we're here for. I'll just like loop that into a 10-hour thing and I'll privately upload it on YouTube and I'll give it to you.
Yes. Okay, great. Every night before bed. That's like my evening routine.
You're manifesting.
3 hours straight.
You are loved. You are worthy. You are beautiful. That's it.
Wow, this is like getting better and better.
Of course. This is what I do. And a couple more. What if you could only recommend one book or one piece of content or something that could have the most meaningful impact for somebody to read? What would it be?
The first thing that comes to my mind is that worksheet of like the 60 things to do. That's what I would recommend.
How would someone find that?
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I'll find it.
Please. Yeah, I want to see it. I'll put it on my wall in front of. Nice. And so what are you excited about that you would like the listeners to kind of be in on from here?
We're constantly doing weird, wacky, wonderful things. So we're going to be launching an app soon where people can join. So imagine a social first health app. So instead of all of your health information being private and secretive as you'd expect it to be, imagine like Venmo where you're publishing your financial transactions, you're publishing your sleep score and your HRV, and you and your friends are comparing how you slept the night before. I have a thing where me and my friends, we guess what each other's HRV is.
What's your HRV
based on
at
interacting.
the moment?
It's right today. It's 70.
Is that good?
Yeah, and for me, it's average. It's right on average.
Yeah. Is it low is better or high is better? I can't remember.
High is better. Okay. High is better.
Mine's not that.
So if you get over 100, it's like you feel incredible. It's the biggest correlation I've seen to my mood is my HRV.
And how do you get better HRV? Just like high intensity exercise, right? And
exercise
sleep.
And stress and sleep, like stress elimination and sleep. Yeah.
Okay. Do you meditate?
I actually don't.
Okay.
No.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've never been a big meditator.
It's funny, since I started doing all the blueprint stuff, actually that's something else that I didn't think of. My general calm is much higher, to the point where previously I was quite anxiously navigating the world, and it was very high, like it was very heightened. Now I'm just kind of like, interesting. That's been a big one.
I understand that.
To the point
it's
where
like steady.
Yeah, it's steady.
Yeah.
And to the point where I don't like drinking coffee. I like it sometimes, but right now I'm like, it's a bit much, and it takes me from the steady state into this really hectic kind of oscillation. And since doing this stuff, I've been less inclined to need to meditate to survive the day. I just kind of get up and just get into it. And it's all okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Great.
Very interesting.
Are you doing wearable? Are you measuring your data?
Yeah, I got my Whoop.
Okay.
I've got a...
What's your HRV?
Not great. It's like 50 something. It's something I really need to work on. I don't know why it's so low.
It's hard. It's one of those things that honestly I find it very difficult to push. Okay, Adam, do you eat before bed?
A bit too much.
Yes. If you can eliminate that, like just do it for one night and see if it improves your HRV.
Yeah. I
just try it.
I'm a late nights. I resonate with the nighttime Bryan thing, because there's a nighttime Adam and he is a monster. Like he's all the worst versions of us.
Seriously, because it's like 4 p.m. in New York, right?
Yeah, it's 4 p.m. The average is 45 this month.
Okay. It's not, it's like, it's not horrible at all.
I haven't worked out much though. I've been in a bit of chaos. So
yeah, I honestly, like, if you can try even just tonight, one night where you stop eating by like, even like 6, if you're usually eating right before bed, just try if you can one night start. Yeah. Just see how it goes. You might be surprised at how quickly and how good you feel the next day.
I know.
But I understand it's really hard.
You are 100% correct. It's the battle of the mind at that time. Yes. And insomnia cookies just down the road from me. And it's really, really challenging.
Bad.
It's not good. And I work late. I finish a gig or something. It's 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And I'm not setting myself to potentially be able to, give myself the best shot of having these sort of things. And I'm conscious of that. I'm hoping that we figure this shit out so that like in 10 years time when I'm sick of this, I can just full reversal.
Yeah. I feel you. Baby steps.
Baby steps. Where can people find you if they're interested?
IG probably. Yeah. My name, Kate Tolo, across all the platforms.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah. I am not really in the content creation game for myself right now, but I want to be. It's just about finding a way to be comfortable online with the content that I'm putting out there. So I'm still figuring out what that is for me, but yeah, stay tuned. I'll be posting more.
Well, I'm going through that process right now and just kind of getting comfortable with it. And I'm working with a lot of like, because Bryan's an easy one because he has a very clear, direct, this is what he's doing. There's a clear goal. It's a bit harder for, say, you and I, because it's a little bit more, we're creating content for the sake of creating content more than the specific and measurable outcome. But I've just found that people are genuinely curious about day-to-day life. And it's not difficult. It's not difficult at all. Like you can do a series of like a week in my life, and here's like the 10 things I did, and all you're doing is BTS, and you can voice over on a road mic, and that's it. After this, I'll send it to you, but have a look I'll show you my like series of the road trip, and that was my first attempt of actually making content for the sake of just doing it. And
that's awesome.
I'll send it to you. So yeah, it's just, I would just say if I have any, feedback on this from dealing with like so many content creators in New York. So I have a ton of amazing content creator friends that aren't in businesses. They're just content first. And they all just say, just don't overthink it, film and get it done. Like my editor, he's had a few videos that have done like 50. One of them did like nearly 100 million views. And it's just like silly, fun ideas, doing things. You have great ideas. You are strong.
That's amazing.
So just get it done.
If that's your like audio track for me, mine's going to be like coaching evening Adam.
Yeah, literally.
Before bed.
No, you don't need that chocolate. You don't need that. Yeah. You are just soothing.
Insomnia cookies, they're out to get you. They don't have your best interests at heart.
They do not. They do not love you.
Bad relationship. You need to get out now.
literally. And I love it. So, and then the final question, thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate it a lot. What is the meaning of life?
The meaning of life for me right now is to tap into the core within myself that already exists and explore my own truth and be as authentic as possible to that.
Why?
Because there's nothing else. Because the only thing you have is your own experience and nothing else. Everything else is meaningless. Nothing else matters. Everything else is made up. So the only thing left is to be authentic to your own experience.
Interesting that you say that. Have you heard of a thing called a Vipassana? It's like a 10-day silent meditation course. So basically in 2022, I did this thing. It's 10 days of silence, no reading, no writing, no eye contact, no physical touch with anybody, no external inputs, no phones, nothing. You're just pretty much meditating 12 hours a day and you're eating and you're sleeping. And the core of it, the core tenet of that whole thing is that nothing else exists as truth outside of our own lived experience. So the process is to get to pull away all the layers of everything else that comes at you from an external input and getting to the core of what is your lived existence in that moment. And that process is how it's done. So I think you're tapping into something that is pretty core to, being effective, being content, being happy, loving well and contributing to the world. It all begins from what is the truth. And the only truth is your internal, sensations and experience.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Totally agree.
Kate, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time and energy. Go on.
I have one question. What feedback do you have for me? I think this would be interesting for others listening as well to hear. This is like the hater comment section, essentially, has now been opened. And Adam, you're going to obviously filter it to be nice, I'm sure.
I'm going to roast you.
But you don't have to. You don't have to. You roast me.
No.
Roasting is now open.
To be honest, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. You've been succinct. You've been thoughtful. I liked that you stopped and paused to consider key things in key moments. And that's really, really important. I think when you had a good answer, you spoke, but when you didn't, you didn't. And that's really, really important because there is no need to fill silence with space and noise for the sake of filling silence with space and noise. So I think you did a good job. Let me think about this further because you put me on the spot a minute. But there's no glaring things so far. So
Okay, cool. That's great. Yeah, the silence before speaking thing is definitely something I've learned from Bryan. Like he doesn't allow himself to fall into that trap, and it's very admirable. And I've definitely taken that on because of him.
I've noticed he does that, and I have done that for a very long time. People are afraid of silence. And this is where it comes back into meditating, that doing 12 hours a day of meditating for 10 days, you get comfortable with the silence. You get comfortable in the discomfort. And it is a really, really powerful place to be, because not many people can handle it.
Yeah, definitely. The start of that short that you just said, where you said people are afraid of silence, that's a really nice starting soundbite for what you just said.
Joe, where's my little clip button?
yeah, exactly. Joe, we appreciate you. Thanks
we
for
love
editing
you.
this.
You are beautiful. You are strong.
I love that.
Well, look, anyone listening, thank you for listening. Give us a like, subscribe, and give the podcast a rating. It helps a lot. And until next time.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Of course.